What happens when one of the calmest players on the Indiana Fever finally decides she has had enough? That was the question hanging over Toronto after Kelsey, Mitchell, and Marina. Mabrey got into a heated exchange that instantly became one of the biggest moments from the Fever's 101-95 win. And the timing couldn't have been more interesting. Because this wasn't just any opponent. Mabrey already had history with Indiana, and especially with Caitlin Clark. So when Mitchell suddenly stepped forward, pointed at Mabrey, and appeared to tell her to stop, fans immediately started connecting the dots. But the real story is more complicated than a simple revenge narrative. The first thing to understand is that Mitchell didn't need the confrontation to make an impact. She had already spent the night torching Toronto's defense. 16 points in the opening quarter, 29 by the time her night was over. 11 made shots on 16 attempts for threes. And somehow, after putting together one of her best offensive performances of the season, she didn't even play the fourth quarter. Fever coach Stephanie White later said, Mitchell had become overheated in the steamy arena, forcing Indiana to finish the game without one of its biggest scorers. That should have been the headline by itself. But then came the confrontation. Mabrey was defending Mitchell aggressively, and at one point the two players got tangled up. They appeared to shove each other. And suddenly Mitchell was standing directly in front of Mabrey, pointing and visibly talking to her. It wasn't some massive fight. There was no need to exaggerate it into one. But it was unusual enough that even the broadcast team immediately noticed. Rebecca Lobo pointed out that Mitchell normally doesn't react this way, even when she is frustrated or doesn't get a call. And that is exactly why the clip spread so quickly, because Mitchell has a reputation for being composed. She's the player who can get bumped, miss a call, turn around, and keep playing. She's usually focused on the next possession rather than the previous one. So seeing her visibly angry made people wonder whether this was just one isolated moment or whether the history surrounding Mabrey had finally changed the way Mitchell viewed the matchup. And there was another detail that made the moment even more interesting. Both players were given technical fouls. For Mitchell, it was her second technical of the season. For Mabrey, it was her fifth. So the officials clearly viewed the confrontation as something that crossed the line of ordinary competitive contact. But neither player was ejected, and the game continued. That's where the internet took over. Within minutes, fans were replaying the exchange, slowing it down, analyzing Mitchell's body language, and trying to figure out exactly what she said. Some viewers treated it like a continuation of the old Fever, Mabrey tension. Others saw it as nothing more than two competitive players get. 1 year later, Marina, Mabrey found herself standing across from Caitlin Clark again. But this time, the player who completely lost her cool wasn't Clark. It was Kelsey Mitchell. And considering how rarely Mitchell gets pulled into this kind of confrontation, the reaction immediately raised one question. What exactly happened between these two? Because the history goes all the way back to one of the most talked about moments of Indiana's 2025 season, when Clark was poked around the eye by J.C. Sheldon, reacted, and then got shoved to the floor by Mabrey during the chaos that followed. Mabrey wasn't ejected at the time, and the decision became a huge talking point among Fever fans. The league later upgraded her foul to a flagrant 2, but by then the moment was already burned into the memory of everyone watching. Now fast forward to August 18, 2026. Indiana was in Toronto. Mabrey was wearing a Tempo uniform. Clark was on the other side. And somehow, the night produced another confrontation. Except this time, Kelsey Mitchell had something to say. To understand why that moment mattered, you have to go back to June 2025. Indiana was playing Connecticut in a game that had already become unusually physical. Clark was dealing with tight defense from J.C. Sheldon. And during one sequence, Sheldon made contact around Clark's eye. Clark immediately reacted, and the two players began pushing and arguing as teammates rushed into the situation. Then Mabrey entered the scrum and shoved Clark to the floor. The footage spread almost instantly. What made the situation even more controversial was what happened after officials reviewed it. Mabrey was not ejected, while Sheldon received a flagrant 1 and Clark, Mabrey and Tina Charles were assessed technical fouls. Later, the league upgraded Mabrey's foul to a flagrant 2. So the story wasn't that Mabrey received no punishment at all. The controversy was that, in the moment, many viewers expected a much harsher response and couldn't understand why she remained in the game. That distinction matters. Because this is exactly how a single basketball play can turn into something much bigger. The game ended with Indiana winning 88-71, but the result almost became secondary to the confrontation that everybody kept replaying. And once a moment like that becomes part of a fan base's memory, it doesn't simply disappear. Every future matchup carries a little bit of that history with it. Every hard screen gets watched differently. Every collision gets replayed. Every argument becomes another piece of the puzzle. That's where the Mabrey Clark storyline became bigger than one possession. Fans began connecting later physical plays to the original incident, even when there wasn't enough evidence to say they were all part of some deliberate pattern. That's an important line to draw. In a league as physical and competitive as the WNBA, contact happens constantly. A tough defensive possession isn't automatically evidence that someone is